All right, third grade, we got the fish tank all set up, and I've actually moved some fish into the fish tank. I've got 4 of those little goldfish from the other tank in there, and they're just getting the system working and cycling, and we want that ecosystem working. And now we're ready to build the aquaponics system where we're going to have the actual plants. Now, I purchased this pan. This is a restaurant prep food tray where a restaurant might like make a whole salad and have it in here waiting to be served and kept in the refrigerator. And the reason I did that is because we're growing food, and some plastics could potentially leak some harmful chemicals into the food if it's not food rated plastic, and that's what this is. So this is made for food, and it's a very large tray. And the problem that I foresee here is this tray is, if you could see, it's almost as big as the fish tank. If I were to take a pump and pump water into this to fill it up and then drain, because that's what we're doing. We're doing a fill and drain system. It's one of the types of ebb and flow systems where water comes and goes. That's what ebb and flow means, come and go. And so if I were to fill this up with water from the tank, then what would happen is this fish tank would go halfway down, and the fish wouldn't have as much water to swim in, and it might kind of mess things up, especially if we still have the filter on there. The water line, if it drops below the heater, we can have some issues in there. And so we have to determine how much water is going to fill this once we put the substrate in. And what the substrate is, it's these clay pellets. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to pour these in here up to where I want it to be. And there's some natural like little markings in the corner, which I think is going to be the line where I want to stop at. And so that's where my fill and drain will, the height of it will be. So I'm going to put the substrate into the tray, and then I'm going to pour water in there and see how much water it takes to fill that up in order to drain it. So this is what the substrate is. It's it resembles like lava rock, and it reminds me of like Cocoa Puff cereal, what it really looks like. So I know we're gonna lose some of the water into the rocks. They will actually absorb some of it. But that's a lot that we're filling up. This is my gallon of water. Now, if I pour this water in and it reaches to the top of the substrate, we're looking good and we can build our system. If it doesn't, then this tray might have to swap out with our other aquaponics and then put the tubes into this fish tank and put the fill and drain into that fish tank. So let's see what happens. It's like filling a bowl of cereal with milk. So there is another gallon. Make sure I don't got any fish. The last thing I want to do is put fish in here. I'm filling this back boy up. So when it's full, that's 2 gallons. I think we'll be okay. So the next step is to rinse these out, because there's a lot of like goopy gunk on here, and I don't want that getting into my fish tank. So I'm going to dump this water out, and I'm going to fill it up and drain it out a few times before I actually put it in the system. All right. So let's do that. All right, so got the table cleaned off, and the substrate is now it's all rinsed out, and now it's soaking, so it's ready for our grow bed. And so now what we need to do is we need to take our tray and we need to build a stand that's going to go over the fish tank, and we also need to incorporate a drain, a fill and drain that will allow this to drain out into the back into the fish tank. So the water's going to come in, it's going to fill up, and then it'll create a siphon, and the siphon will suck all the water back out, and they'll just have this continual ebb and flow of the water that'll allow the roots to get some air and also allow the roots to get the water and nutrients from the fish tank. So first thing we need to do is build a stand that's to fit this and the fish tank. So I bought some PVC pipe, and I'm going to measure it, and then I'm going to cut it and put it all together. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so now we've got the rack is set up to hold the tray. Now what I gotta do is build our drain, okay? Now this is super important, building this drain, because this is how the water is going to siphon out. Now siphon, remember we talked about last week, is where it sucks the water by itself without using the pump. So what'll happen is the water will fill in here with the pump, and then we're gonna drill a hole and make a drain so that as the water fills up the side, it creates a suction and then sucks it back out. This is called a gasket, and what it is it screws together to hold that pressure, but then it's got this rubber washer here that keeps the water from leaking through. So when we place it on here and we screw this down tight, it's not going to let any of the water leak out. So there's our drain. Perfect. Now that the bell siphon is complete, and it will drain out, and now we need to fix the drain on the other side, because what we don't want to have happen is it just spilling all over the place. So what we want to do is kind of get this in place and measure it and cut the PVC pipe to fit so it drains exactly where I want it to into the fish tank. Now it's all done. All I got to do now is let it dry for a little bit and test it out. All right, so here we are, time to test this thing out. Got the Home Depot bucket, and we are going to carefully spin this around so that way it drains into the bucket, okay? We don't want to use the fish tank water yet. We want to make sure everything works. Then we'll install the pump and start cycling out the water. All right, now we're going to fill this up, and as soon as it reaches the top of the drain, right there, so as soon as it reaches that drain, it should then drain down into the bucket. So let's try it out. And it's draining. It's doing what it's supposed to, and there's no leaks. All right, now's the time to test the bell siphon. So what we're gonna do is this. I'm gonna put in my bell siphon, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push this down in there, and it'll be like I'm adding water without adding the water. And if everything works right, what'll happen is all this water will just start draining out and just go away. So let's try this out. So it's like I'm adding more water, but I'm not adding water yet. And it's still draining, which means the bell siphon is working, and it keeps draining. It's going all down by itself now, and it's going further down than the drain top. So if I remove the bell siphon, you can see how much lower than the drain it sucked all that water down here, down to where the holes are. So it works. All right, the last part is going to be installing this pump into the fish tank and running the tube up to our tray. Now we add the substrate. Now if we did everything right, I'm gonna plug that pump in, it's gonna fill this up and drain back into our fish tank, and everything's gonna work perfect, and then we can add the plants. Let's try it out. Now, this pump has a flow control on it, so we may need to adjust how fast the water is being pumped up into our tray. Water level is getting pretty low, and the substrate's floating on the top, so it's not displacing the water as much. But it started to drain. All right, so everything worked perfectly except this substrate is like styrofoam. And so what's going on is as the water's filling up, it's floating on top, just like you do with the bowl of cereal. So this is a lot more like cereal than I thought. But the drain works great, the pump works great. So just a few minor tweaks and then we're ready for plants. Have a great week.